Hello, Dr. Slay. How are you today?
Fabulous. How are you?
Wonderful. So we're back with another episode of the Fuck Calories podcast. A few weeks ago, we had been talking about various different diets, and so kind of as a counterpoint to that, we're going to move into different ways to move our bodies.
Mm,
I personally think this is gonna be a lot more fun than the different ways of eating. This is a topic that I think is both near and dear to both of us. So we're going to kind of first start with just like an overview of the different styles of movement and exercise, and we'll talk about everything about the science, about why it's important, about different ways to track, about different tools and hacking and different things that we can do to kind of track our progress and what kind of progress metrics we should be looking at. So that's kind of where we're going. And any thoughts or comments to get us started?
no, there's lots on our agenda, so let's just jump in. I think a lot of people maybe have heard the 150-minute rule.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about that? Is that a good place that we should start? If it is, what does it mean?
Yeah, so the 150-minute rule, it was put out by, I think, if I remember correctly, the American Cardiology Association in combination with the Diabetes Association and in combination with American Medical, I think.
I can't
Can't
remember
remember.
exactly. I was like,
Yeah, but it's
yeah.
like it's a very common rule that basically you want 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise over the course of a week. So typically that breaks down to like 30 minutes 5 times a week or
Mhm,
something to that effect. And by moderate intensity, they mean something like, brisk walking, etc. It doesn't have to be, you know, like we're super intense or rigorous.
right.
And so that is a metric that has been shown to decrease your cardiovascular risk and to improve health outcomes long term. I
Mhm,
think you and I kind of think that eventually we should be moving towards more. But of course, if someone is starting from a place of zero, as you and I did,
mhm,
um, I was at a point where like I literally walking up the, few steps to my apartment would get me a little bit winded,
mhm,
and would definitely get my heart rate up. So we know what it's like to be in that place. And so for people who are starting from that point, that is totally okay. But a goal to be moving your body such that that type of strain isn't doesn't get your heart rate up is kind of
mhm,
where we're moving towards. You and I embrace the health at any size uh, mantra or philosophy, but part of health at any size includes actually being healthy,
mhm,
and that health requires cardiovascular and cardiovascular uh, what is the word I'm trying to look for? A high VO2 max and
mhm,
good muscle mass. And so, in order to embrace that health at any size, that doesn't mean you can be a couch potato. That means
right.
moving your body and having a VO2 max that can sustain and support a lot of activity and movement. And so we're going to kind of talk about those different movements. And so the 150-minute rule, I think that we should try to progress beyond that, but I definitely think it's a good place to start if you are just starting out on your fitness journey.
Absolutely. I love it as a first goal. And I even give or recommend that I break it up into smaller goals for my patients. So 30 minutes, 5 times a day, sorry, 5 times a week can sound daunting for someone that's not doing anything, right? They're like,
Yeah.
that's a lot of 30 minutes
Yeah.
every day and I don't have time. And where am I going to find 30 days? And so then I take a step back and we break it up even further. And I said, okay, is there a place that we can fit in exercise or movement in 5-minute increments? Perfect. Let's move
Yeah.
it to 10 minutes. Can we do 10 minutes 3 times a day, twice a week? And then we move it from twice a week to 3 times a week, right? And so we're
Yeah.
slowly building on these incremental cornerstone and flags that we keep passing on our way to hit that first goal, right? Of 150 minutes. And again, 150 minutes is kind of just an ideal. It's not everyone's stop or go, but it's a great number that everyone is kind of aware of that you've probably heard of. So it's a nice, right, round number, if you will. The number can change depending on the intensity, and we'll get into that a little bit later. If you are doing exercise that requires a little bit more intensity or vigorous exercise, they call it, right? Is that running? Is that CrossFit? Is that, right, high intensity interval training, etc.? Then they say you can spend less time. But for those of us that were on the couch and we're just trying to get ourselves walking, jumping from nothing to that high intensity can be unfortunately the downfall for a lot of people, right? I
Yeah.
usually have the mentality of going big or go home, and it has caused me a lot of issues in my life, right? I continue to not learn my lesson. Do not do what we have done, which is trying to go from couch to marathon training in a year.
I
But
was just about to say,
you know,
speaking of which, as
yeah,
someone who talked me into doing a marathon this later
right?
this year.
I'm like, come on, how hard could this be? Apparently it's very hard. So we are living proof of that. I live it every day. But um I and I think a lot of people too want to say, listen, if I can do this, I'm going to go big, right? And I'm going to join CrossFit and I'm going to do something. And usually our body is not ready for that. And a lot of things can happen, including injuries along the way, which we are trying to prevent. So then I kind of say, as I'm talking to them about trying to break up into smaller time goals, is also intensity goals. So walking, I think, is a fantastic starting exercise that is beneficial for everyone.
Yeah.
And realistically, besides the cost of the clothes you're already wearing and the shoes that you're already wearing, as long as they're not heels, you can be walking, right?
Yeah.
So we have older and even multi-generational patients that take walks after their meals together, and that's a perfect bonding experience. Helps with digestion, and you're getting your exercise in. But what are some other starting tips that you usually talk to your patients about?
Yeah. So another thing that can be really helpful, that is another common metric that we hear tossed around, is the 10,000 steps a day. And that
Mm,
is another thing that is a really, really fantastic goal. It does not have the evidence behind it, actually, that 150 minutes a week has. But it was actually first coined by some person, I forgot, I think they were in Japan.
mm,
And I think I can't even remember the history about it. We should have looked it up before this podcast. But anyway, the person was kind of like looking at fitness people, and I think, or cardiovascular fitness, and they had odometers on people, which are like the little not odometers, just kidding, pedometers,
mhm,
odometers in a car. um and they noticed, I think it was at a break point of like 9,000, that people above 9,000 had a decreased mortality versus people below that. And so then they ended up just rounding it to an easy 10,000 steps. And so then it kind of became this mantra of like, try to get 10,000 steps in a day. And that is another really fantastic goal. If you are trying to do your 30 minutes of walking each day, then you're probably going to get pretty dang close to 10,000 steps a day, depending on what kind of, like, if you have a sedentary job, you may not have any other source of walking.
right.
So it's kind of depends, if do you need to have like specified walking time, or you are already getting enough steps at work. If you are getting enough steps because you have like an active work, I still think that you need some sort of exercise in addition to that, and we can talk about that. But it's another metric just to kind of start with, that's really fantastic. And that doesn't mean that like if you are currently getting 2 or 3 thousand steps a day, you don't immediately jump into 10,000 steps tomorrow. Instead, you should do like 4,000 for a week each day, and then 5,000, and then maybe 7,000, et cetera, and work your way up to it. But
Mhm.
10,000 steps in a day is a really fantastic way to kind of um, have a metric that you're focusing on for moving your body.
Right. And I love the fact that you brought up pedometers, right? So
Yeah.
the little thing, it's really just a step counter, right? And it's really
Yeah.
tiny. I saw one recently at our goodness, I'm losing it. It's either Goodwill, Salvation Army, secondhand store kind of thing. $3. And I was like,
Yeah.
$3? You can't beat
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Brand new, they're running about $10. So
Yeah.
we're trying to keep the barrier to entry very low, right? And so
Yeah.
do not
Yeah.
go out and spend money on things or exercise equipment because there are other ways to get this
Right.
movement in until we get to that spot where you do want to try maybe new
Right.
things or go a little bit more advanced. But I think counting your steps is a fantastic way. I know I have a very sedentary job. I go, I greet the patient, I bring them back to the exam room, and then we sit for an hour.
Yeah.
And then we just talk, right? And then I do it again, and then I sit. So if I was not constantly either being reminded from my watch to get up and move or not trying to hit running or walking goals or something, then the day gets out of my
Yeah.
hand. And I've now only had 2,000 steps in an entire
Yeah.
10-hour period, which is
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
So,
And I think you bring up a really excellent point. There's a way to keep track of your steps without having to go buy an expense. Like you don't need an expensive Fitbit or an Apple Watch or
right.
anything else like that. You literally can do this with a pedometer that are super, super, super cheap. And so I'm really glad. It's a great point that you brought up.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about like having to like physically count your steps.
Right, right,
Like,
exactly. And a lot of times
yeah,
they just clip onto your waistband. I know when I first started them, I kind of put it in my pocket, and
yeah,
what it's doing is it's looking for that movement of you walking, and
yeah,
so every stride, it basically is in your pocket or on your waistband, like clicking away. And so then you just check it every kind of once in a while, and you're like, perfect, I'm already at 5,000, and it
yeah,
encourages you to continue moving, and is that little kind of rush of dopamine when you check it and you're like, I'm already halfway there, and you get excited,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And so, so far, what we have talked about is different movement styles that are going to increase your respiratory fitness. This is sometimes measured in VO2 max, and we will have a later episode on VO2 max. But cardiorespiratory fitness is your body's ability to have an efficient heart pump when it's pumping your blood around your body. And then additionally, your lungs efficiency in taking in oxygen and putting it into your blood and circulating that around. And so that mechanism is very, very important for longevity. And if you are in a bigger body and you are claiming health at every size, which we definitely think is important, and we
Mhm,
definitely think is you absolutely can be healthy in a larger body. Um, we cannot neglect, and this is true for anyone who is in a smaller body as well, we cannot
mhm.
neglect our cardiorespiratory fitness. So it's super important to be focusing on improving our cardiorespiratory fitness through this type of cardio exercise. And we'll do a later episode that's strictly focusing on that. Let's kind of shift gears a little bit. The other aspect of this that we will be talking about is muscle mass. So that
Mhm,
is another thing that's really important for movement is our muscle mass and our ability to put on lean mass and as well as to be strong. And that is really important because as we age, our ability to have muscle mass and to hold on to muscle mass helps prevent us from injuries, and it also prevents as we age, things like falls and stumbling, and it predicts longevity. So it's super, super important for our if especially for any of our audience members who are insulin resistant. I'm kind of getting off into the weeds here, but our muscle mass and our lean mass that's on our body functions metabolically to act as like a glucose sink, meaning that it participates in all the metabolism of our glucose and our insulin and that entire component of our body is regulated by our muscle mass. And so it's really important that we have both strength for our movement ability, but also to help contribute to the processing and the fuel partitioning and the um, of the food that we do intake.
absolutely, yeah, I love, uh, talking about, I guess, strength training or maintaining our strength and functionality, right, through our age. We see that we lose muscle mass starting around the age of 30 unless you are not consciously putting in work all the time to not lose that, right? And so we definitely want to prevent anyone from losing muscle mass. And if we've already passed the age of 30 and we have not been consciously doing it, let's start doing it now. So where do we even start? If
Yeah.
we think about things in the equivalent of what is a low entry point that I could get into strength training, similar to walking. My some of my favorites are going to be body exercises or body weight exercises I can start doing at home with my body I already have, and
Mhm.
or bands. So strength,
Yeah.
those stretchy bands that again you're doing exercises at home, but it creates a resistance which helps you build your muscles a little bit better and in a different way than body weights or calisthenics, etc. So what are your thoughts there?
Absolutely. Um, Kind of similar to the like Fitbit and the, Apple Watch and everything. You don't have to go buy a super expensive gym membership. You don't have to go buy like an entire weight rack and everything,
Mhm.
because some of that equipment is very pricey.
Yes.
This can just start with just your body, doing not maybe not everyone can do a push-up, but you can do like what I used to do, push-ups against the wall. So basically
Mhm.
you're like standing and then like a wall's in front of you and you're like leaning. I don't know if I'm like I don't know
Yeah.
if with my videos going in and out, but basically you're like pushing up against the wall like while you're standing.
Mhm.
And doing different movements like that with your body. So push-ups against the wall. You can do modified tricep dips where you're like sitting off the side of a chair using your triceps to lift you up. That might be something that we talk about in the future. That's a little bit where we maybe show people what we're talking about because it's a little bit difficult to describe. Just air squats is something that's really great to it's with the hip hinge. And then you can also do something as simple like anything that you have in your fridge or anything you have in your pantry, like a 12-ounce can of whatever you have, whatever canned
Mhm.
foods you have, doing hip hinge with those and picking them up and then lifting them overhead and vice versa. And so you can start with things that are super, super basic that are excellent for strength training, and then progress your way up to there. And then at one point, if you want to go to a gym, you absolutely can. But it's so easy to start with just basic things, and even just carrying heavy things around your house. Um, there's an entire exercise called farmer's carry, which is where, gym bros carry around weights. They literally just grab an extremely heavy weight and just carry it, like walk back and forth with it in their hand. Um, and because that does strength stability along your spine in order to stay upright, because if you're off balance with just one thing on one side of your body, you're all of your muscles along your spine are having to maintain upright. And so that improves the strength. And then additionally improves your grip strength. And anyway, but my point is that you can do that at home without any, like without, like with the jug of milk. You don't have to have like a fancy, expensive barbell or dumbbell or anything like that. So you can do this with just the stuff that you have at home. Like just go find something that's heavy. I think you and I had talked about, like, I think you had one point told me that you took a book bag and put some books in it and carried it around.
Mhm.
So I mean, you can do this with stuff at your house. You don't need anything that's fancy. You don't need any expensive equipment, but something to get your body using your muscles.
Absolutely. One of my favorite pieces of equipment I start patients on at home is the chair. And
Yeah.
so I have a lot of patients that are older, and one of the first exercises I want them to work on is actually the get up and go, getting
Yeah.
themselves out of the chair and walking across the room and then coming back and sitting down. And what that is doing is building the muscles in our legs back similar to a squat, but you have the chair there to catch you. So if we don't feel like we have the strength, stability, agility, balance to even do squats, you don't have to worry because you can squat into a chair. And if anything happens or you topple your fall, you have the chair to catch you, right? Once you settle
Absolutely.
again, now you're getting yourself out of the chair and you walk across the room, you come back, do it again. So even those small little building blocks add up over time. I then have them use that chair to help with balancing exercises, right? Keep that in there. And so when they're doing hip swings or leg lifts or anything of the sort, they still have something that is feasible and right in front of them that they can hold on so we're not falling, we're not losing balance, etc. I think stability and balance are also a key component that as everything in our health improves and we gain that muscle mass and strength back should also come with it, but I don't want us to neglect balance. So sometimes we'll even throw in things like yoga, right? So
Yeah.
yoga brings in a little bit more stretching, a little bit of lengthening that muscles, a little bit of the agility and balance when you're really getting into widening your stance so we're not falling and now I'm using arms above and over and making sure that my core is staying tight and I'm not toppling or falling, but
Yeah.
again we continue to build on our previous exercise experience. And so we
Yeah.
continue to make things harder and harder, and we get better and better. And in that way, you can find that you are challenging yourself appropriately.
Absolutely. And you totally can go join a yoga studio and pay for that membership. But you can also, for anyone who's watching this podcast, you can, just like you're watching this podcast, you can go to YouTube and watch yoga classes and do yoga
Yes.
with it. I mean, it's very, very cheap and simple and easy way to focus on that aspect and care for your body in that way
Hmm.
of, caring for your muscle length and elongating your balance and elongating your spine to help balance your entire body so that you can have better movement in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I love watching or looking at YouTube videos because it tends to be free. I mean, it really costs the your internet connection.
Yeah.
But if we don't have an interconnection or a place to watch YouTube or computer, I love my public library because all of that is also
Yeah.
free and accessible to you. And I can spend time looking at these websites using their internet. And they also tend to have books that can give us examples or pictures, right? We have hundreds of years basically of humans doing these. They tend to be functional exercises, right? And what I mean by that is that it makes us stronger, but we were tend to do something. We were carrying those pails in. We were lifting heavy things in the fields when we were working. We were doing manual labor. We were doing etc. Right? So it kind of is taking a step back and reminding ourselves that, like, oh, that kind of just looks like, right, the farmer's carry of me holding 2 gallons of water bottles as I'm walking down the field. I can
Right.
absolutely do that. I have two gallons of water. A gallon of water or a gallon of milk is roughly about 8 pounds. So if we want to start lighter, that's where the cans would come in. But again, we're building our way up to it. But library, free access, YouTube is fantastic. And then the world is your oyster because you have everything and all the information at your fingertips.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited for this series. We're going to dive into each of these aspects that we've talked about so far in a little more detail coming up, and I'm excited to get into it.
Absolutely. It should be lots of fun. So let us know what you guys want to hear. Otherwise, we'll see you in the comments and we'll see you next time.